My name is Sarah, and at my graduation dinner, my father announced my sister's graduate degree and ignored my scholarship in architecture. As everyone toasted at my graduation dinner, I waited anxiously for a chance to tell them I'd won a scholarship to study architecture. When I finally opened my mouth, my father paid no attention. He simply said, "That doesn't cover everything, Sarah. Let's focus on what's feasible." Across the table, my sister smiled, raising her glasses to her. My achievement became a topic of conversation. I smiled on the outside and crumbled on the inside. Years later, they saw my name plastered across the headlines, and they understood what they had ignored. I grew up in a house where Jessica was the sun, and I was, at best, a distant star. My parents, Robert and Linda Mitchell, are successful accountants in Charleston, a two-story house in Somerville, a perfect lawn, two German cars in the driveway. By anyone's standards, we were a lucky family. But luck, I discovered early on, is not distributed equally among sisters. I remember the day I won the school drawing contest when I was 8 years old. I ran home with the certificate in my hands, my heart pounding with excitement and pride. I found my parents at the kitchen table, helping Jessica with a science project about volcanoes. "Mom, Dad, look, I won first place." Mom looked up for 2 seconds. "That's cool, Sarah. Hang it on the fridge." Dad didn't even look up. "Jessica, you need to use more baking soda to make the lava." I hung my certificate among the utility bills and dentist notes. Jessica hung her project in the living room where everyone could see it. At the time, I thought it was just a coincidence, that next time would be different. It took me years to understand that there would be no next time, at least not for me. That was my first lesson in family hierarchy. There was Jessica, and there was me, and I would always be the other one. At 16, Jessica received a blue Honda Civic with a red bow for her birthday. At 16, I heard that you earn a car with responsibility. "But Jessica doesn't work," I protested, watching her take selfies with her new keys. "Jessica was always more responsible," Mom replied, as if that explained everything. I got a job washing dishes at Captain's Choice, 3 blocks from home. $5 an hour, 6 hours a day on weekends. My fingers were as wrinkled as raisins, and the smell of grease clung to my hair. But at least it was my money. Jessica took private guitar lessons. I saved up to buy new sneakers. The difference became even clearer one Friday night. I arrived home from work 10 minutes late because the bus broke down. I was grounded for 2 weeks. "Responsibility is learned through consequences," Dad said. 2 weeks later, Jessica arrived home from a party 2 hours late. My parents were watching TV when she walked in. "Did you have fun, dear?" "Very much. Thank you for letting me go." "Great. Good night." I watched everything from the stairs, invisible as always. That night, I understood that we lived by different rules. Jessica had the right to be a teenager. I had the obligation to be perfect. I was always good with numbers and drawing. While other children played with dolls, I built paper houses and drew floor plans on the back of scrap paper. My paternal grandparents, before they died when I was 16, always told me that I would be an architect. "That girl has an eye for space," Grandpa Charlie would say, looking at my popsicle stick models. "She'll build some beautiful houses someday." My parents thought it was cute, but impractical. When I was 16, I entered a state-level technical drawing competition. I spent 3 weeks working on a sustainable home project, calculating angles, measuring proportions, and coloring every detail. I won first place in the youth category. The award ceremony was on a Friday night in downtown Charleston. The same day, Jessica had a piano recital at school. "You can't both go," Mom said, as if it were a simple math equation. "Jessica's recital is more important," Dad added. "She's applying for a music scholarship." I went by bus alone. I received the award alone. I returned home alone, holding the trophy that no one in my family saw me win. Jessica didn't win the music scholarship. but no one seemed to care. After all, she was already perfect anyway. Jessica was everything my parents dreamed of a daughter. Perfect grades without any apparent effort, exemplary behavior, never questioning rules. She chose business administration because it's a solid career, as Dad loved to repeat to anyone who would listen. She was predictable in a way I could never be. I asked too many questions, dreamed of things they didn't understand, wanted to build houses instead of managing
complicated.
spreadsheets.
I heard Mom say on the phone to my aunt once, Jessica is easier to understand. When Jessica graduated from high school with honors, my parents threw her a party. 30 people, caterers, 3-tiered cake. When I graduated 2 years later, also with honors, I was treated to dinner at the Olive Garden. It's different, Mom explained when I asked. Jessica is the first to graduate. I'm going to graduate too. Yes, but you understand. No, I didn't understand. Or rather, I understood perfectly, but I didn't want to accept it. I watched Jessica go off to the University of South Carolina with everything paid for: tuition, housing, a new car, and an $800 allowance. It's an investment in her future, Dad would say, as if he were investing in stocks. I began to wonder what kind of investment I represented to them. From the evidence, a very high-risk asset. For me, conversations about the future were always accompanied by caveats and limitations. Sarah, be realistic. Sarah, not everyone can have a luxury profession. Sarah, how about a technical course? It's more guaranteed. At 17, when I mentioned my dream of studying architecture, my dad literally laughed. Architecture? Sarah, that's for people with a lot of money or a lot of talent. He paused, as if calculating which of the two options I had less of. How about administration, like your sister? Or nursing? There's always an opening for a nurse. But I want to be an architect. Wanting and getting are two different things, daughter. Mom tried to be more gentle. Honey, architecture is very competitive, and you know we can't afford an expensive college. How about something more affordable? Affordable. That word had haunted me for months, as if my dreams had to fit into the family budget while Jessica's were top priority. I started researching colleges alone, hiding in my room. I calculated costs, analyzed scholarship options, and studied student loan notices. While Jessica received private career guidance, I guided myself through Google. The message was clear: Jessica deserved investment and support. I deserved low expectations and excessive realism. Our house in Somerville was the epitome of upper-middle-class America. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a pool in the backyard, a stainless steel barbecue. Dad drove a black BMW, Mom drove a white SUV. Dinners at fancy restaurants were routine, at least when it was to celebrate Jessica. My achievements deserved pizza at home. The neighbors knew the family dynamics well. How's Jessica doing at college was always the first question. I was the other Mitchell daughter, the one they greeted politely but never asked about my plans. At church, Jessica was the example other mothers used to motivate their daughters. Look at Jessica Mitchell, what a responsible girl. I was the one who sat quietly in the pew, invisible even though I was there. During family dinners, Jessica would talk about internships and opportunities. I would talk about working at the restaurant. The difference in the reception You're going
was striking.
far. At least Sarah's learning the value of work. One was praise, the other was consolation. Little by little, I began to internalize that our home had 2 parallel realities: Jessica's, full of possibilities and support, and mine, full of limitations and low expectations. The worst thing wasn't the lack of money for my education. The worst thing was the lack of faith in my potential. May 2015, my high school graduation. Dad had chosen High Cotton, the fanciest restaurant in Charleston, to celebrate properly. The whole family was there. Uncles, maternal grandparents, cousins. I was genuinely excited. For the first time in years, I felt like maybe I was really special. She had been accepted to Clemson University for a 40% scholarship to study architecture. It wasn't all paid for like Jessica had always been, but it was a start. I spent weeks rehearsing how I would break the news. In the middle of dinner, Dad slammed his knife into his wine glass. The entire restaurant turned to look at our table. "We want to make a special announcement," he said, smiling. "Jessica has been accepted into the USC MBA program. We are very proud, and of course, we will cover all the costs for her." Applause. Smiles. Uncle Richard shouted, "Congratulations!" from across the table. Jessica blushed, feigning modesty. "Thank you, Dad. Thank you, Mom." I took advantage of the pause and took a deep breath. It was my turn. "I have news too." My voice came out louder than I intended. "I've been accepted into architecture at Clemson." Silence. A heavy, awkward silence that lasted at least 10 seconds. Dad cleared his throat. "That's good, Sarah, but you know we're going to have to be practical about this." Mom quickly added, "Jessica has always been more responsible with money, so it's only natural that we invested in her first." "But what about my bag?" My voice came out weak, almost inaudible. "Partial scholarship still leaves a lot to pay, daughter, and architecture is very uncertain." At that moment, in front of my entire family, I understood that I would never be a priority. Jessica deserved a paid postgraduate degree. I didn't even deserve an undergraduate degree. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. We ate cake, took pictures, pretended normalcy, but something had broken irreparably inside me. That night, as I lay in my room, I stared at the high school graduation certificate on my desk. Summa cum laude, academic honors, technical drawing awards. None of it had mattered. I cried for 2 hours, not just from sadness, but from anger. Anger that I had believed this time would be different. Anger that I had expected them to see me as more than a second option. But in the midst of the tears, something changed. A voice inside my head, which seemed to come from my deceased grandparents, whispered, "Then prove them wrong." I sat down on my bed and grabbed a pen and paper. I started calculating. Community college for 2 years, transfer to a state university, part-time job, Spartan life. Would it be hard? Yes. Would it be impossible? No. That morning, at 18 years old, I made the decision that would change my life forever. I would be an architect, with or without them. Every no they gave me would become fuel. Every doubt they had about my potential would become motivation. I didn't know how yet, but I knew that one day I would return to that dinner table as a woman they could no longer ignore. I wrote on a piece of paper, "Sarah Mitchell, future architect." I stuck it on the wall, right next to the mirror. It was my declaration of war, a silent, determined war, and I intended to win. August 2015, while Jessica moved into her USC apartment, paid by our parents, with new furniture and a stocked refrigerator, I enrolled at Trident Technical College, a community college in downtown Charleston. 2 years there would cost a quarter of what Clemson would have cost right off the bat. That was my plan. Save up for core credits, keep perfect grades, and then transfer to a real college. Small classrooms, old desks, noisy air conditioning, nothing like the college photos Jessica posted on Instagram. But it was my beginning, and I was proud of it. I got a job at Morrison's Building Supply, a home improvement store. 30 hours a week, $9 an hour. It wasn't much, but it was mine. My supervisor, a gentleman named Earl, taught me about wood types and tools. "Smart girl," he said. "You know these things." For the first time in years, someone recognized my talent without comparing it to Jessica's. My parents feigned support. "I'm glad you're being practical, Sarah," Mom said, but I could hear the relief in her tone. Relief that I would no longer be a financial liability. The nights were long. I studied until 2 in the morning, woke up at 6 to work. My body ached, my eyes burned, but my determination only grew. Every page I turned was one step further away from the dinner table where I was humiliated.
She lived in a tiny apartment with 3 community college roommates: Rachel, who was a nursing student, Mike, who was a welding major, and Jennifer, who was a night business student. My room was the size of a walk-in closet. Literally, a converted walk-in closet. $200 a month was all I could afford. The refrigerator was always empty. Breakfast was crackers, lunch was peanut butter sandwiches, dinner was ramen noodles or whatever was left over from the restaurant where Rachel worked. Some weeks, when the electric bill got really high, I just skipped dinner. I wore clothes from the Goodwill thrift store. My backpack had a hole in it that I pretended not to see. I took the bus in a city where owning a car was practically mandatory. 2 hours on public transportation to and from work. Weekends were the worst. Jessica's Instagram posts included fancy restaurants, new clothes, weekend getaways with college friends. Loving college life. #blessed, she wrote. I spent weekends studying in the public library because it was the only place with reliable heat. Some nights, crying from exhaustion and loneliness, I wondered if my parents were right, if I was being too stubborn, too proud, if it wouldn't be easier to give up and accept that some people are born to dream small. But then I would remember my certificate taped to the wall, Sarah Mitchell, future architect, and I would get up and study for another hour. It was in technical drawing class that I met Margaret Chen, the teacher who would change my life. A Korean American in her early 50s, she spoke with a light accent and had eyes that seemed to see right through people. On the first day, she watched my work for 5 minutes in silence. Then she leaned over and whispered, "You have natural talent, but talent without discipline is useless." During the semester, Professor Maggie, as she asked to be called, challenged me in ways no teacher had ever challenged me before. She corrected every crooked line, questioned every proportion, demanded redoing of work that other teachers would have easily approved. "Sarah, do you think this is good enough?" "Yes, teacher." "For whom? To pass the subject or to become an architect?" At first, I felt persecuted. Then I understood. She was preparing me for a world that would not make concessions. Every criticism was an investment in my future. One day, after a particularly difficult presentation, she called me into her office. "Sarah, have you ever thought about sustainable architecture? Like this? Housing for low-income people, projects that make a real difference. That's where the future is." She lent me books, showed me projects by famous architects, taught me about energy efficiency and alternative materials. For the first time, I saw that architecture wasn't just about beautiful buildings.
Professor Maggie
It was about
the
changing
first
lives.
person to believe in me without reservation. Second semester at Trident, something changed. Grades that had been good before became excellent. Applied math, basic physics, technical drawing, it all made sense in a way it never had before. Professor Maggie called me after class on a cold Friday in January. "Sarah, there is a scholarship for exceptional students at Clemson University. Transfer with full scholarship for those who demonstrate academic excellence and professional potential." My heart stopped. "Do I have a chance?" "You have more than a chance. You have merit." She handed me a folder of applications. "But the competition is fierce. You'll need an exemplary portfolio and a very strong letter of recommendation." I spent the next 6 weeks working like never before. I redesigned all of the semester's projects, created floor plans for sustainable homes, studied successful cases of affordable housing. I slept 4 hours a night. Earl, my supervisor at the store, noticed my dedication. "Girl, you're working towards something big, aren't you?" "Trying for a college scholarship." "That's great. You deserve better than selling screws to rude men." In March, I got the call. I was accepted for transfer with a 70% scholarship. It wasn't all paid like Jessica always had, but it was my chance. I cried in the store's bathroom for 20 minutes, out of relief, out of pride, out of a happiness I couldn't contain. I was finally getting out of the hole they dug for me. January 2017, Clemson University. The campus was just as I had dreamed. Historic buildings, green lawns, students carrying architectural plans under their arms. For a moment, I felt like I was finally where I was supposed to be. Reality hit me on the first day of school. My classmates arrived in their parents' cars, talked about unpaid internships as if they were hobbies, and used expensive equipment as if it were basic. I arrived on the city bus with a patched backpack and a borrowed calculator. The scholarship covered 70% of my tuition, but I still needed $3,000 a semester for the remaining 30%, plus room, board, and supplies. I got a job at a small construction company in Anderson. Hard work on the weekends, a 45-minute commute each way. My supervisor was a gruff man named Steve who treated me like I was a nuisance. Architect, huh? Are you going to design little pink houses? But I needed the job, so I swallowed the comments and carried boards. Classes were intense. Complex projects, expensive software, demanding teachers who assumed everyone had full time to study. I worked Saturdays and Sundays and studied until dawn during the week. My classmates formed study groups in expensive coffee shops. I studied alone in the library, eating homemade sandwiches. They bought new books. I took pictures of relevant pages in the bookstore. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was building something of my own. Every approved project, every high grade, and every compliment from a teacher was proof that I was on the right path. Even alone, I was climbing. It was on a particularly difficult Sunday afternoon at the construction company that I met Tommy Rodriguez. I was carrying 20-pound bags of cement, trying not to show that my shoulder was hurting, when a dark-haired young man approached me. "Let me help you with that." "No need, I'm fine." "I'm sure it is, but my mother would kill me if she knew I let a woman carry this
and studying
alone."
civil engineering at night at Anderson University. The son of Mexican immigrants, he worked construction during the day to pay for college. He was the first person I'd met who understood my struggle without me having to explain it. "My parents also think my older brother is smarter," he said during our first shared lunch. Plain sandwiches sat on a pile of bricks. "Carlos is a doctor. I'm the one who's still trying." "At least you're not compared to a perfect sister who never failed at anything." Touch. Tommy had an easy way of laughing, even when he was talking about difficult things. He didn't try to impress me or compete with me. He just understood. He understood the exhaustion of working during the day and studying at night. He understood the frustration of constantly having to prove himself. We started sharing lunches, then occasional dinners when we were both too exhausted to cook, then late-night conversations about dreams and fears. I didn't know it yet, but I was meeting the man who would teach me that love is not a competition. It's mutual support on the climb. Third year was when I almost broke down. The course load had tripled, the projects were more complex, and I still had to work to survive. My body and mind were at their limit. The final blow came in history of architecture. The professor demanded a specific book that cost $300. I tried everything: library, borrowed; secondhand bookstores, out of print; online PDFs, non-existent. Without the book, I couldn't follow the lectures. I failed the first test, then the second. When the final test came, I knew I was lost. "Mrs. Mitchell," the professor said after announcing the results, "you need to take the course again. It's a prerequisite for the fourth year." It means another semester, more money I didn't have, more time away from graduation. That night, I had my first anxiety attack. My heart was racing, I was sweating, I felt like I was dying. Tommy found me on the floor of my apartment, hyperventilating. "Sarah, breathe with me, slowly." I can't anymore." "Yes, you can. Look at me. Breathe."
He spent hours calming me down, holding my hand, telling me I was strong enough. But for the first time since I had started this journey, I doubted myself. Maybe my parents were right. Maybe I was too stubborn, too proud. Maybe it was time to accept that some mountains are too high for some people. The morning after my breakdown, Tommy showed up with a proposition. "Sarah, how about I lend you money for the book and you pay me back when you can? No rush, no interest." "Tommy, I can't accept this." "Why not? Because it will hurt your pride, or because you don't think you deserve help?" The question hit me hard. As a child, I had been taught that I had to achieve everything on my own, that asking for help was a sign of weakness. But Tommy was offering genuine support, without conditions, without comparisons. "It's not charity, it's an investment. I believe in you even when you don't believe in yourself." That same day, Professor Maggie called. She had gotten my number from the Clemson office. "Sarah, I heard you're having a hard time. There's a student aid program that few people know about. Emergency aid for students with academic excellence and proven financial need." Within 2 weeks, I received assistance with books and materials. I was able to enroll again in architectural history. Tommy helped me study, testing my knowledge every night. I passed with an A grade. That semester, I learned something fundamental. Accepting help is not a failure. It's recognizing that no one builds anything completely alone. Family isn't just blood, it's who shows up when you need it most. And I had found my true family. Fourth year came as a revelation. Finally, in the core architecture subjects, I blossomed in a way that surprised even myself. Projects came naturally, creative solutions that impressed teachers, grades that put me among the best in the class. My final project was a series of plans for sustainable, affordable housing. 60 square meter houses with solar energy, rainwater harvesting, and optimized natural ventilation. The total cost would be 40% lower than traditional construction, maintaining quality and comfort. "Miss Mitchell," Professor Williams said during the presentation, "this project has real potential for implementation. Have you considered submitting it to competitions?" I hadn't thought about it. In my mind, I was still the girl who carried bags of cement to pay for college. The idea that my work could have professional relevance was social project in the class, a $25 gift card to the university bookstore, but the recognition was priceless. For the first time, classmates approached me to ask questions about my project. "Sarah, where did you learn about sustainability? Sarah, are you going to work in affordable housing? Sarah, can I use your ideas as reference?" It was surreal to be sought after, consulted, respected. After years of being invisible, I was finally being seen for who I really was, an architect with her own vision. Tommy celebrated by buying pizza, a luxury we rarely allowed ourselves. "I told you you could do it," he smiled. For the first time in years, I believed him. Something had fundamentally changed inside me during my senior year of college. The insecure girl who sought constant approval was giving way to a woman who knew her own worth. I no longer minded when my parents posted pictures celebrating Jessica's accomplishments. New job, nice apartment, rich boyfriend. I no longer felt that pang of envy when I saw my classmates' cars, or when they talked about vacations I could never afford. I was building something different, something of my own. Every brick of disachievement carried my sweat, my determination, my refusal to accept the limitations others placed on me. Tommy noticed the change. "You seem lighter," he said one night as we studied together. "Like this?" "I don't know. Less angry at the world, more at peace with myself." He was right. The anger that had driven me in my early years was turning into something more productive, confidence. I no longer needed to prove my parents wrong about me. I knew that it were. I started to dream about the future in concrete ways. Where to work, what kind of projects to develop, how to use my architecture to make a real difference. For the first time, my dreams were not a way to escape the present, but a natural extension of what I was building. I was becoming the person I always knew I could be. Last semester, Professor Williams approached me with an opportunity that would change everything. Sarah, there's a statewide contest that happens every year called Young Architect of the Year. First place wins $10,000 and an internship at one of Charleston's most renowned firms. I think you should enter. My heart raced. $10,000 was more money than I had ever seen in my life. More importantly, it was official recognition, a gateway to the professional market. What would my proposal be? Your affordable housing project, but expanded. An entire community, 50 sustainable homes with detailed costs, execution schedule, environmental impact, and economic viability. It was exactly the kind of challenge that excited me. 3 months to develop a complete proposal. 3 months to prove that a girl no one took seriously could create something revolutionary. Tommy immediately offered help. I understand budgets and schedules. We can work together. Professor Maggie, even though she was retired, volunteered for weekly reviews. Sarah, this is your chance to show what you're capable of. Let's not waste it. I dove into the project like I had never dived into anything before. I spent 4 hours a night, lived on coffee and determination. It was my master's dissertation, my doctoral thesis, my letter of introduction to the world. It was everything. The last few months before the competition were the most intense of my life. I worked on the project from the moment I woke up until I fell asleep over my books. Tommy skipped classes to help me with the structural calculations. Professor Maggie drove an hour every weekend to
into
review
something
my
I
progress.
had never expected. Comunidade Verde Esperança, Green Hope Community. 50 sustainable housing units, a common area with a community garden, an integrated water collection system, and shared solar panels. All designed for low-income families, but without sacrificing quality or dignity. Sarah, said Professor Maggie during one of our sessions, you are no longer proving anything to your parents. Now you are showing the world who you really are. The observation struck me deeply. It was true. Somewhere along the way, my motivation had changed. It was no longer about revenge or proof. It was about passion, about making a difference, about being the architect I had always dreamed of being. A week before the performance, we rehearsed 20 times. Tommy asked difficult questions, acting like a judge. Teacher Maggie timed each part of the performance, demanding precision. Remember, she had said the day before, you're not asking to be accepted. You're showing them what they'll get out of you. That night, I looked at all the plans, calculations, and models scattered around my tiny apartment. Years of work, of sacrifice, of refusing to accept limitations. It was all summed up in those papers. It was my golden chance, and I was ready to shine. May 2019, Charleston Music Hall. The historic building was decorated with banners for the Young Architect of the Year competition. There were 5 finalists from across the state, and I was the youngest, 22 years old, fresh from a state college, competing against graduates from expensive private universities. I arrived 2 hours before the presentation. Tommy accompanied me, clutching my project folder as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. Professor Maggie met me at the entrance, looking elegant in a navy blue blazer. How are you feeling? Scared, anxious, ready. Perfect. That's exactly how you should be. The jury was made up of 5 renowned architects from Charleston and Columbia, including Margaret Sullivan of Sullivan and Associates, the city's most respected firm. For a moment, when he watched me walk up to the stage, I thought I detected surprise in his eyes. A young girl, in an outfit borrowed from Rachel, about to present a project on affordable housing. I took a deep breath and began. Comunidade Verde Esperança is not just a housing complex. It is a revolution in the way we think about dignity and sustainability. For 20 minutes, I presented every detail. 40% lower costs, positive environmental impact, design that respected the families living there. I showed how 50 families could have their own homes without sacrificing quality of life. When I finished, there was silence for 10 seconds. Then, Margaret Sullivan leaned forward. "Miss Mitchell, do you really believe this is feasible?" "I don't believe it, ma'am. I know. Because I know the struggle of these families. Because I've been there." It wasn't the answer a candidate should give. It was the answer I needed to give. The deliberation lasted 2 hours. Tommy and I waited in a nearby coffee shop, him trying to distract me with bad jokes, I mentally running through each slide of the presentation. "Sarah, regardless of the outcome, you've already won," he said, taking my hand. "You got here on your own merit." When we returned to the auditorium, my heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear it. 5 candidates on stage, families and teachers in the audience, anticipation heavy in the air. In third place, Jacob Harrison of the University of South Carolina. Applause. It wasn't me. Second place goes to Amanda Foster of Furman University. More applause. There were 3 of us left. And first place, winner of $10,000 and an internship contract at Sullivan and Associates. The world stopped. Literally stopped. I could hear my own heart.
For a second,
Sarah Mitchell,
I thought
the
I was
Clemson
dreaming.
University.
Then the rush came. Relief, disbelief, a joy so intense it made me tremble. Tommy shouted, "I knew it," from the audience. Professor Maggie wept quietly. Margaret Sullivan came on stage to present me with the award. "Miss Mitchell, in 20 years of judging, I have rarely seen a proposal so technical as well as humane. You have a bright future." I held the trophy, not very big, but heavy as a mountain of dreams come true. I thought of my parents, who didn't even know about the contest. I thought of the 18-year-old girl who cried alone in her room after the graduation dinner. She had won. We had won. What I didn't expect was that the victory would be just the beginning of the real turnaround. I didn't invite my parents to the ceremony. I didn't even tell them about the contest. To me, they had lost the right to participate in my victories when they chose not to invest in my dreams. But Charleston is a small town, and success attracts attention. On Monday, I woke up to 53 notifications on my phone. Local TV had covered the competition, the Post and Courier had a story about young architectural talent, and my picture was on the front page of the business section. 22-year-old architect revolutionizes concept of affordable housing, read the headline. Mrs. Peterson, our childhood neighbor, posted the link on Facebook with the comment, "Charleston Pride, I always knew little Sarah Mitchell would do something big." 47 shares, 212 likes, comments from people I didn't even remember knew me. My phone rang at 9 in the morning. Dad. "Sarah, why didn't you tell us about the contest? We're so proud." I was silent for 10 seconds. Then, "Proud of what, Dad? You didn't even know I was graduating until you were on TV." "Daughter, you know we always support you." "No, you bet I would fail. There's a difference." I hung up the phone. It was the first time in my life that I had hung up on my father. The second call came an hour later. Mom, crying. "Sarah, dear, we always knew you could do it. Why didn't you include us in this achievement?" "Because achievements are shared with those who were present in the fight. You chose not to be there." What impacted my parents the most was the social impact. Charleston is a city where everyone knows everyone, especially in the community of successful accountants like them. All week long, clients, coworkers, and church acquaintances have been asking the same question. How do you feel about Sarah's success? Have you always supported her dream of becoming an architect? They had no honest answer to these questions. Mrs. Williams, the wife of Dad's biggest client, called to congratulate them. "How proud you must be. Investing in the education of your daughter, who is an architect, must have been expensive, but it was worth it." Awkward silence. Dr. Patterson of the congregation mentioned over coffee after the service. "Bob, your daughter is in the news. What a blessing to have an architect in the family. You must be bursting with pride." More awkward silence. Jessica called on a Tuesday, her voice strange, almost embarrassed. "Sarah,
everyone is asking why I'm not a famous architect too. The people at work saw the article and now they're talking about my talented sister. And how do you feel about that? Confused, proud, and guilty. I always knew you were smart, but I never imagined what I could achieve without their help. And that too. It was the first honest conversation we'd had in years, and perhaps the most important. Public recognition was my sweetest revenge. I didn't have to confront them
Sullivan
directly.
and
The whole
Associates
city
hired me
did it
as
for
a junior architect after my internship. Starting salary, $55,000 a year. More money than I had ever dreamed of making at 22. More money than Jessica was making at the job my dad had gotten her through his connections. My first official project was to develop the Green Hope community for real-world implementation. The city of North Charleston approved the pilot project, 20 homes for low-income families funded by a federal housing program. At 23, I was building homes that would change real lives. Tommy graduated in civil engineering and got a job at the same construction company that would be executing my project. We worked together every day, turning blueprints into reality. In December, he proposed to me while we were on the construction site of the first house we completed. Sarah, you taught me that love is about supporting each other on the climb. Do you want to climb the rest of your life with me? It was the most perfect proposal I could imagine, in the place where my dreams became concrete, surrounded by the smell of fresh paint and endless possibilities. I said yes, knowing that our wedding would be paid for by ourselves, planned by our own hands, celebrated with people who truly loved us. My parents tried to include themselves in the planning. We want to help financially, Dad offered. We want it to be special, Mom added. Thank you, but we don't need it. It's already special because it's ours. It was my final declaration of independence. In the months following my public success, my parents made several attempts to reconnect. Invitations to dinner, offers to help with the wedding, congratulatory cards for each new professional achievement. Sarah, we know we messed up, Mom said during one particularly emotional phone call. We want to be a part of your life. You want to be a part of my life now that it's become something you're publicly proud of. Where were you when I was carrying bags of cement to pay for college? We didn't know you were going through so much struggle. Yes, you knew. You chose not to see. Jessica also tried to mediate. She came to my apartment on a Saturday afternoon, nervous, carrying flowers bought in an expensive store. Sarah, can I come in? We need to talk. For the first time in years, we spoke without masks. She admitted that she had always known about the privileges she had and that she had always felt guilty about the difference in treatment, but she had never known how to approach the subject. I didn't know how to be your sister without sounding condescending. I've always had it easy. You've achieved everything on your own. How do I compete with that? You don't have to compete, Jessica. You never did. That was their mistake. I offered her forgiveness, but made it clear that forgiveness did not mean returning to the status quo. Our relationship could be rebuilt, but it would be different. It would be based on honesty, not family convenience. It took my parents longer to understand that forgiveness did not mean returning to the status quo either. Today, at 28, I sit in my 20th floor office and look out the window at the city that grew up in. Charleston is still beautiful, with its historic homes and cobblestone streets, but my perspective has changed completely.
They talk about me with pride to strangers, send links to articles about my projects to distant relatives, and want to be part of my life. Jessica and I have a civilized relationship based on mutual respect. She acknowledges that she always had it easier. I acknowledge that it wasn't her fault. But the truth is, I don't need their approval anymore. That 18-year-old girl who cried at her graduation dinner died somewhere between carrying bags of cement and receiving a state award. In her place was born a woman who knows her worth, regardless of anyone else's opinion. Tommy and I got married last year,
a simple ceremony in a small church, the reception in the backyard of Professor Maggie's house. Every detail chosen and paid for by us. My parents were there, proud, but out of place, trying to fit into a life they didn't help build. Today, I work exclusively with affordable housing. I design homes for families who, like me, have been undervalued by those who should support them. Each plan I design carries a bit of my story. The certainty that everyone deserves a decent home, regardless
Last
of
month,
what
I
others
got a call
think of
from
their
a single
potential.
mother who had moved into one of the homes I designed. "Dr. Sarah," she said, "my 8-year-old daughter designs houses just like yours. She says she's going to be an architect like you when she grows up." At that moment, I understood that my true revenge was not proving my parents wrong about me. It was becoming the kind of person who believes in underrated children, who invests in unlikely dreams, who builds bridges where others see chasms. I discovered that revenge is not about making others pay for what they did to you. Revenge is about no longer needing their permission to be happy. It's waking up every day knowing that every achievement you've achieved was earned, not given. It's about looking in the mirror and seeing someone you respect, regardless of how many people failed to see your worth. My diploma still hangs on the wall, not as a reminder that I made it, but as a reminder that I will never, again, let anyone else decide what I deserve or don't deserve. I decide. And deciding for myself was the best decision I ever made. Sometimes I still think about that 18-year-old girl writing "Sarah Mitchell, future architect" on a piece of paper and sticking it on the wall. She didn't know it yet, but she was declaring war on the limitations others had placed on her. And she won.